Oh, hello listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the Dead Air podcast. It's myself, Jacky, and of course the magnificent Blank back in the building. There's been a patch, Blank, and we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, the magnificent Sinclair! In-game, all caps. I don't know why that's not changed yet, honestly. I feel like that was a pretty easy fix. But that was not on the priority list. Priority list was 3 lanes. Get rid of the solo lane, take it out, put 3 in. Kill Park, unfortunately. It was a large debate between pink and purple lane.
Yeah.
And that's been put to bed now, which is nice. It's good.
It's also weirdly still called Park. But
yeah.
We spoke about this last night. I think that's probably a bug, because that would make no sense if you kept York as yellow, Boulevard as blue, but then had Park for green. It's got to be Greenwich again soon, right?
Bring Greenwich back.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the Greenwich voice lines are good as well. So yeah,
I like
bring it back. Bring it back.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Also, it confuses a lot of Americans how to say it right, because obviously
Greenwich.
Greenwich is where it's where time comes from in England. Blank Greenwich Mean Time, GMT.
Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah. I thought you like that's the origination of all time. I was like,
no, that's just like it is done from Greenwich, like UK time. Yeah. There you go. That's where GMT is from.
Yeah. Good.
Been there a lot.
Have you?
Yeah, Greenwich. I was not far from where I used to live years ago. So it's just a big park, and they've got a big bell tower. They've got like an observatory underground. Whole load of stuff in Greenwich, mate.
That's
Lovely
a big park.
Place. Yeah, see, exactly. Literally is a big park. Yeah.
Maybe that's why.
I think there is also a Greenwich in New York.
Maybe.
But
maybe that's not why. Yeah, who knows?
But also, you've got to remember, guys, most things in America took their naming convention from places that already existed in England, because they just did it again. Like, New England, New Jersey.
So cool. But maybe we don't name it after some of the places which have horrid names.
Yeah, like Scumthorpe.
Yeah, that's
Staines.
not great. Basically, they learned from us, and I think that's good. Yeah, they learned and adapted on what we'd already done. They were like, you guys have made some questionable decisions. We're not going to go with those, but some of these names are kind of nice. But they're going to be difficult to pronounce.
Yeah, throw people off a little bit, like Worcester.
No Worcester. Worcestershire.
Worcestershire. Yeah.
Just Worcestershire. That's it.
They can't handle it. They can't handle it.
Worcester. Boom. Done.
There you go. Right. Well, that's the educational segment of the podcast. Let's talk about the patch. But yeah, like Blank said, right? So obviously, I imagine if you're not living under a rock, you've seen, what was it, yesterday, day before, 25th. So about 2 days ago now, with the patch drop, map rework update. That was the title. Steam banner goes out. All of it's done through Steam now as well. It wasn't on the forums. Forums just linked back to Steam. They've got artwork on there. Massive patch. This is probably one of the, I'd say it actually probably is the biggest update we've ever had.
Yeah, it was huge, humongous. Not like a lot of hero balancing, though.
No.
It's mainly just throwing in a lot of changes to the map, how it plays overall. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing, guys. It really is, because I think the previous map, it wasn't super accessible, I would say, to a lot of players. I think that was some things that definitely detracted players from playing. There's been moments in the past where I think a lot of people have also left for other reasons. For instance, the fact that we had do you remember back when we were in the hotel and we were doing like one of the first podcasts, going through all the patch notes. And it was just so many changes to items and heroes. At one point my phone was on 2% battery. We were trying to get through it all.
I think that weirdly that was one of the longest unofficial episodes of the with because that was the first one. That was like a patch notice on the road, because we were both there, and I couldn't film patch notes. We were like, right, let's do it. That was like 3 hours of reading them off, because obviously if you want to give your actual input on the changes, it takes ages. But the patches for this game used to be abundant, but it was always minor stuff, like we said, right? Like you're looking at like stat changes, slight item tweaks, removing some stats for some items. This is an actual update. This is inherently, it's not a balanced patch, it's not a minor patch. Like fundamentally, we've had things for the game change, mechanics change, new ideas implemented. This is really what they meant, I imagine, by that 2025. We're going to be giving you big patches when they're ready.
Which is a good. I think honestly, I think when we had the 1 week cycle, that was cool. Seeing the game get updated a lot. Then we went to 2 week cycle, and we were still updating the game in terms of balancing a lot. I think they're in a fairly comfortable spot right now. There are some egregious heroes, and I think that's something they'll probably tackle a little bit later. But a lot of that brain power, a lot of that brain juice has been going into this map, which is fair enough because it's a difficult change, right? You're removing a whole lane. You're trying to accommodate for a lot of new rotations. How is this going to work? How are people going to get around the map? It's a tough one, definitely a tough one. But I'm glad, and I think having these kind of updates is going to be healthier, in my opinion, in the long run, Jacky. Just because you don't really want to have to relearn a new game every 2 weeks. Obviously, it is in what we call alpha testing right now, and there is going to be changes coming through. I respect a lot of you in the comments of the videos who say, guys, you signed up for an alpha, you've got to expect changes to come more frequently. I think at this point in time where the game's getting more fleshed out, I think it's reasonable for Valve to pull back a little bit and be like, we're going to just give you large updates and let you enjoy the game in the long run so you get some better data on what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's also, it made sense, like the balance patches to a degree. And there's even times now where it's like certain things, I do wish you just randomly whacked a hotfix that just tweaked one hero, Calico. But yeah, outside of that, right, like it's honestly got to a point where I think the game balance on a hero-to-hero basis, most lane matchups, most things are fine. Like there's no game-breaking sort of overarching element where I'm like, oh, this needs an entire rework. This is breaking the game. Nothing's really that bad. Like you can, you can go up against anyone, have fun. You can play anyone and have fun. So I think fixing on that side is marginal now to the things they're actually doing. Where like in this patch, there's those entire overhauls where it's not only the change to 3 lanes. You've got this new animation system that's going in, right? You've upped the tick rate. They're changing sounds. There's so much here that's that level of polish that it kind of felt like it was still a while away. So it's very cool to now get this peak that actually maybe some of that stuff has just been being worked on and getting to a stage where they're happy with it. And now you slowly roll it out into this version of the game, right? Rather than what obviously they're probably playing at Valve.
Yeah, exactly. I think, piggybacking off that, it's a case of, you have this huge update that comes through and you want these hot fixes, but you can't really effectively put them in because you're changing the way the game plays so much. And I was tuning into DFN yesterday, the old Deadlock fight night, and it was fun watching it, but it was clear and obvious that some heroes are now much stronger than others, purely because the way the game plays right now. There's so much jungle. I'd even go as far as to say that maybe there's too much jungle right now. I think that it's so abundant that either there needs to be less of it or the spawn times need to be increased, because we were having Talons who obviously have been great in the past. And if you get a Talon to late game, like before in 4 lanes, criminal behavior going on in the lobby. But now, because I think we were experiencing as well, you get people up to like 40, 50k souls pretty quickly, and you can funnel those souls a lot easier into one character. So Grey Talons are going nuts in the pro scene at the moment because they just get to that power spike so much sooner.
Yeah, well, I think it's the culmination of all of the little changes, alongside obviously the big one being the way you've completely overhauled like the jungle system, right? For anyone that's unaware, right, if you haven't watched patch notes, you haven't read it, you're just kind of listening into the podcast, like, oh, what have they done? I haven't played it yet. Fundamentally, you've just got to factor in that this is now way larger density in a smaller area, so more souls per jungle camp effectively with the way they've been restructured. It's not like you have your small tier ones. You've got a mixture. Both of them are like, you have like your inner lane tier 1 camps that will still spawn, but then you've got all of this extra soul count that's going into the other camps. Sinner Sacrifice has been massively overhauled as well, which we'll go into a little bit later, but those are pretty crazy at the minute with just how much of a buff you're getting from them.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's actually mad. Like, to the point where even in our games, we've been kind of prioritizing the minute that spawns in, you piece out the gamble.
I was watching Vegas play on stream the other day. I mean, it's only recently. Probably, I think it was yesterday. We just finished playing Deadlock at like 3 a.m. because we're back to crazy hours once again because we're playing a lot of Deadlock. I tuned into his stream, and the guys in like the Eternus lobby, they're literally fighting over the safes, like at minute 7, like invading to fight over the safes. I had a shiv yesterday in my game chase me down as I was trying to take down the safe and just parry on the safe itself. And I was like, what is going on here? But yeah, they're incredibly strong. And like Jacky said, we'll go into them a little bit later. But yeah, the balancing overall could be tough, just because there has been a lot of changes. Like Jacky says, loads of new jungle camps, much more interesting to get around in there. There's going to be new viable routes to be taken. It's definitely fun. I just think that we're at this point now where it's such a great change, and I'm glad that what they did, what Valve usually does about a lot of things in Deadlock at the moment, like the team, I enjoy what they do with this, is they like to push everything really far on the high end, right? So it's much easier to nerf stuff and bring it down, like that, where they'd be like, right, that's too much, pretty obvious it's too much, let's just pull it back a little bit more. That feels like it's in good space, and we can leave it at that. So yeah, things do feel a little bit wacky right now. They certainly do, but I think that will change with time. This is just hitting now. All of us, we get to play it for the first time. Obviously, they've probably been doing some kind of internal testing with the team, but there's only so much data you can get, right?
No, exactly. Well, I suppose it's also, like you say, that's kind of how they've done everything with this game now since we ever first got access, right? Like, you throw something out at max level, scale it back because it's a lot easier for them to do so, and then it does sort of average out usually in a pretty good spot. Again, it's classic in the way that they've done it, but it does mean, I think you've got a lot of people that are being thrown in, probably some uneasy with the idea of change anyway, because that does seem to be a common trope with most gamers these days. Like, sudden change really throws people off. So not only are people like, whoa, the map's different, I've got to get used to this. Suddenly it's also, what do you mean I don't have the last hit? The jungle's all in really close groups. Suddenly everyone's getting free golden statue buffs. Like, what am I doing? And I think it's just all of this in one has probably jolted some players, and probably maybe even worse for people that are deciding to come back and give it another go, because obviously the skill level's raised so much in the past few months. I feel like the bar for Deadlock is getting higher and higher. People are understanding movement more. They're realizing how to farm. And now you've basically gone, right, we're going to put all of that in a way where it's a bit more fun. It's a little bit less kind of like, the skill checks before of you've got to get the timings right and all these souls, you're just not going to get anything from that. If you're a casual player, that probably is a bit annoying. And I can imagine you being like, well, I don't understand. Why am I getting souls sometimes but not others? Whereas, like, obviously, for people like us, it's kind of just like, oh, yeah, that's just a gameplay mechanic. It makes sense as last hitting. Yeah. But I can see why they've done all this stuff. Like, a lot of the ideology behind it does feel like they've prioritized the idea of making the game just more approachable and fun, but not dumbing it down. Like, they're two different things. It's not like they've gutted the game. It's just they are trying to make it a bit more enjoyable for everyone.
Exactly. Now, there's, like, the accessibility portion of it is really important, because I think the game was getting to a point where, man, it was catered for hyper competitive nature, right? Which is fair, because it does lean itself towards being an esports, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, it is a game to be enjoyed and for fun, which it definitely is. But it was getting to a point where you jump into some of these games, if you hadn't played in a while, you were just completely lost. And it's really tough. And I hear this complaint a lot of times from people where they're like, there's things in the game that is very, very hard to explain. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was explaining to them how the Sin of Sacrifice worked, that you've got to hit it on the last light bulb as it passes through. The way to do that is you just charge up your heavy melee as it hits the third to last light bulb. In my head, I'm like explaining all this, and he's like, what are you talking about? What do I get from that? I'm like, I haven't even explained what the rewards were at this point in time. These are just, there are things that are like, unless you've read the patch notes, unless you've delved into that side of things, you're not going to know about it. And that led me to another thought, which is a case of, well, a tutorial would be great, but Valve just cannot feasibly make a tutorial for the game. You will
not for everything. Yeah.
Not for everything. It would be possible to do it in future once everything's ironed out. Because I think if you ever play any MOBA, like you play Dota 3, you play League, once you get into that game, it will throw you into an empty map, and then you will have a narrator take you through, explain all the things, and then it'll throw you into a couple of bot games, and then you finally start playing with some real players. You can't do that in Deadlock right now, because what's the point of making a tutorial which is going to be defunct in like a month? There's no point. So to everyone who's still playing the game right now, or if you're just still interested and keeping up to date with it, I think a big thank you is necessary to you guys that's still playing and still keeping up to date with the game, because you're sort of the lifeblood right now that's keeping the game going. So yeah, big thank you from the Dead Air team.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's one of those as well where, especially in its current state, it's kind of like it was ages ago, but obviously they scuffed it a little bit because you added rank and then removed it. So there is still the overarching rank number that goes up and down, which freaks some people out. But there is no downside to just playing and learning through the feedback of the game. There is bot games built in, so like you have that element to learn. But I get where you're coming from, and I think it's just one of those where the easiest way to learn Deadlock, sadly, is by playing it and losing. And then you get better over time. Yeah. It's one of those games, you know what I mean? It's like a Souls-like kind of game where there is so many weird mechanics you're never going to think of until you've just been owned by it once and then gone, oh, okay, I see you can do that. But there's a million things. And I think even half of that is things that Valve's overlook when they implement stuff into the game and then realize it's become a feature later and then maybe try and tweak it a little bit to make it an actual feature. Because that's how they've always worked with other games. They tend to take like bugs and turn them into gameplay mechanics. But again, I think patches like this are putting us on the right direction. I would say like 6 months from now, with you making a massive change like this, of going, right, we're going to make it 3 lanes, we're going to overhaul loads of stuff, we're starting to implement finished character art, finished little bits of graphics around the map as well. It kind of makes me think again, it's not unrealistic that the game does ship this year. And I think with a game like this, again, all it takes is it's a Valve game. The minute you just say it's out and the floodgates are opened, I don't think anything will matter. I think the numbers will skyrocket. Everyone will be in. Everyone will be trying to learn for themselves, and you'll have a fresh wave of like, if you get in there, just start playing. You know what I mean? And you'll be playing against people that have just started playing. You could even group it where like it knows if you've played pre-release, you go into a special. You can queue against anyone. Anyone that hasn't queued, they play against people that haven't ever queued. You know,
which would make sense, right? I think for the game releasing. In my opinion, it's earliest Q4 2025. I still think there's a lot to be done. I think it'll be closer towards a beta by that point, 100%. Like you say, a lot of the art pass is coming through. But realistically, there's not a lot that this game needs to be super successful at this point in time. Like, the game is incredibly fun. Anyone who's played it, when the big streamers got on the hype train of this game, they were like, this is going to be huge in the future, once it's finished. And I mean, even just looking at the new Abrams model, it looks gorgeous in game, and I can't wait to see a lot of the other characters have the same kind of treatment in the future. But yeah, there's just a lot of things still to be done, to be improved on. Once this game... Because right now, I think it had sort of that identity crisis of, are we 4 lanes? Do we need to be back to 3 lanes? Do we need to sort something out around there? They've done that. Like you say, I think this is a good direction to go in, because the map needed sorting big time. I'm glad we got the Eclipse back. We started to get that art pass coming through. There's really cool models inside the map now. It feels much more akin to a finished map that you would play on a release game. And now it's a case of you get another 10 heroes into the roster pool. It becomes a whole lot more alive. And then you're looking at more closer, ready to release. That's in the hands of the Valve team at that point in time. But the way I see it is that the game can only get better from here, because they're listening. They really are listening to everything. And I think the Valve team works so incredibly hard on this game. Like, they've not given up on it one step of the way. It's just a case of let's keep going. And anyone who does play the game, hyper devoted. I think we've had that 16,000 to 18,000 player concurrent base for many months now. I think I talked about this in the last podcast. Just being able to hold onto that number is impressive.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think people look at it wrong because obviously it's like, that is higher than a lot of sort of, generic video games that come out and they either flop or they meander around for a bit. Whereas, although it's not at the heights it was on the initial, it's there. You can talk about it now. You can go play it, where we were going up 10,000 players a day and whatever. Again, I don't think any of that really means anything because I imagine that will be the same outcome when we go live. And effectively, if you factor in that all that is a very dedicated sort of audience of people that are playing a very early test for a game, then I think it all starts to make more sense. But that's just the problem where fundamentally it's a game industry thing where people like Activision and companies like that have ruined it for everyone because they say this is a beta when it isn't. It's an early access test of literally the same game you're going to play a month from then. They just do it to bait you in.
Yeah,
right?
It's like this is a beta now. This is literally what
it's
we're going to be
the
playing
game you're going to ship me. You see what I mean? So I think that companies like that have wrecked it for everyone because then where Valve say
such a good point.
This is a test, people go, oh yeah, all right. People are expecting I've tried to explain to people before. It's literally none of the character models were final. I think Abrams technically probably is one of the first, very possibly final models we've been given ever. But people don't get that because obviously they think it's what do you mean? Game looks fine. Because it does, because games don't look like this when they're in those tests. You know what I mean? This is Valve's level of quality for a test, so it's scrambled everyone's brains. They don't know what's happening.
That's honestly, it's a really good point where it's a case of, this is an open beta. It's well, you're not taking feedback from anyone. You are literally just going to ship the game in this state.
It's just a demo. It's just a demo. That's what it is now.
Yeah, I'm just getting a demo. But for this, this is a true test.
This is a test,
which is cool. Which is definitely cool. And again, for anyone listening to the podcast who has stopped playing the game but you're still interested in it, keeping up to date, I think it's completely fair that you do that. And I'm not going to defend the game in that sense at all from those people who have stopped playing the game because the game changes so frequently that it's only people who truly passionate or really enjoy the playstyle of the game that are going to keep playing it because some people just don't want to have to relearn the game every 2 months. Again, I completely understand it. And when the game is the finished state, I reckon those people are going to come back.
Yeah.
And they'll be I will now learn the game because I know it's not going to drastically change in the next 2 months.
I've even noticed that because, anecdotally, there was people that obviously were commenting on the patch notice where they were saying, I avoided learning the old map because I thought things would change. Yeah. And now they've done this, I guess I'll start learning it. And it's just to a degree, that seems crazy to me because it's if you're going to be playing the game at all, you should just build up the muscle memory of learning the game as you're playing it. You know what I mean? You should, each game you play, use that as a bit of a test to kind of understand the things that you want to understand, be it a hero, be it an item or whatever. But fair enough, homie, if that's you. But yeah, again, even with that, it goes to show some people don't like that stuff, where if they boot up the game and suddenly, you say your ult has changed on your character, you've not read the patch notes, you've got thrown in game, you tried to seismic impact someone, instead he's opened a black hole, you'd be baffled. You'd be like, what's happening here? Why is Abram this? Why is he doing that? So I get that side entirely. I think it's just different. It's one of those where, particularly right now, if you're very into Deadlock, I think you're very into Deadlock because it's this has become sort of the new sign. Obsession, for us especially. This is all we do.
Well, I think that's a great sign though, because I think if you can get obsessed with something, then it must be a good.
It's rewarding, exactly.
It definitely has that reward factor to it.
Dude,
go on.
I was just going to say, it's also, I think the thing that Deadlock has done so well that people also don't even realise yet is it's not just this. And it ain't ever going to be just this.
Yeah.
This is a vertical slice of what will be so much. Imagine even as well, right? Like, let's go as far as put on our goggles and look into the future a year from now, when everything's in. Yeah, like when you imagine everything's in, even the extra bells and whistles they've had time to add in based on it's being out. You could have like a Dota workshop style built in, right? You could have a RTS game where you play as McGinnis. You could basically recreate StarCraft.
You could do it like it. You could literally make Dota 3.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to have the visual dating novel. Like, that was something we always knew they were working on. When that goes in, this game is going to absolutely dominate an entire different market. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much to Deadlock that isn't even what people associate with Deadlock right now. That I just think it's hard to put that into perspective, because obviously, like, we could literally sit there and be like, look, they're going to do this, they're going to do this. But until it tangibly exists and people go, whoa, actually, there's stuff for everyone. Like, even the movement buffs, homie, I'm going to be real with you. It's like someone from Counter-Strike, with how surf and bunny hopping have massively decreased and declined in the transition to CS2. This game gives you that itch. You could have viscous movement maps. You can have surf maps. You can have all this different stuff. Imagine like a slide map where you're just like crouch sliding around everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This game has the potential to be like a Gmod style sandbox alongside a game. And I think that's what Valve have owned. I think this is going to be like the pinnacle Source 2 game in terms of giving people access to Source 2 in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so I used to be a big fan of watching Titanfall speed runs back in the day, which was like based on Source Engine, right? And I think I enjoy watching all that and like all the movement tech, like the crouch slide, hopping, stuff like that. A lot of that exists in Deadlock, funnily enough. So that's all really interesting to me, because there is so much to be done there. Even just like the Titanfall like initial training range, where people spent days upon weeks like trying to figure out how to get the fastest time on that. There's going to be stuff like that in Deadlock as well. There 100% will be when people start to delve into it a little bit more. And we already have like such a fantastic modding community already. I mean, we speak to them quite frequently, and they're all very passionate about the game. They're always looking at making new stuff, which is super fun to have, and they are working on big things in the background as well. So I think the modding community is definitely going to go crazy when the game like fully opens up. So that is very awesome to see. But yeah, there's so much more to the game. Like even the visual novels, like you're saying, that stuff isn't here yet. We know it exists, but it's not fully fleshed out just yet. That's going to be implemented into the game. That'll likely tie into other stuff within the match. There's still no skins. When skins get released, you know that's going to be a big thing. Yep. I'm excited, man. I'm very, very excited for all that stuff to come through, because really just feel like you're like watching a tree grow right now. We're at the sapling stage at the moment. We're just watering it, making sure it's getting enough sun, and it's gonna start to pop off. And I mean, there's already some crazy changes been brought through in this patch in terms of finalizing things, which is always a really good sign. I think even in the patch notes, you went over the new gun sounds, just sounds in general. Fucking awesome, by the way.
It's sick. It's really good, yeah.
They're so visceral. I don't think I've heard gun sounds like that in quite a while in games where they just feel good. Like shooting Hayes' gunners, it's a magical moment. It's a magical moment.
No, it's unreal, because it's so also the patch notes, the official term they've used for this, by the way, is anyone that's had those sound updates that says updated to use the new weapon gun audio system. So it's not just new sound effects, because you'll notice it in game. It's the fact that it's more dynamic with how it reacts to where you are on the map, when you're low ammo. Like they basically, obviously, I guess they've worked on an entire fundamental new way to deliver this audio in-game, right? So that we're getting that on some heroes now that have probably had the final pass for it. But you can see audio is a big part of this. You've got the voice lines now that are going in. Again, that's one for the lore buffs. That's one for the people that enjoy the interactions between characters, right? People have whole conversations now in the warm-up to a game. There's going to be a whole load of voice lines for zipline passing conversations that were put in that are in the files. They'll be coming in soon. You've got all that gun audio, all the changes as well, to not only just just character audio, but audio in general. Because one of the things that was frustrating me a little bit was seeing how everyone was passing around this idea of, I can't remember what it was called, it's like Deadlock Timer or something like that. It's on the Reddit, people were talking about it. I find that stuff egregious. Like, as someone that had a lot of time in Quake, at most, homie, if you're not using a stopwatch to time that shit, you're doing it wrong. If you can't remember it and you're not doing it in a way that makes sense, using an external program, albeit just a timer that goes off throughout a game, I find that borderline, like, come on, homie, this seems a bit dodgy. But that was getting spread around. People saying, oh, I'll use this. So obviously Valve must have seen that, right? And they've gone, well, fuck that. You could have voice lines. Like, have voice lines for when stuff's going to spawn. So, like, the camps make noise now. Rejuve makes noise now. Rejuve even has the huge indicator that comes down. And I like that. I think that's a better direction. Giving everything as, like, it doesn't need to necessarily be a skill check of can you remember time. Yeah. It's just can you associate this noise with that and get used to the timings.
Yeah, there's loads of cool stuff in that way. I mean, it's important to have because I think showing things... audio visually, like that's the best way to do it, so everyone knows what's going on all the time. You've not got a separate application open tracking all the things. I reckon pros will still buy into that, and that's fair enough because they want to have every single advantage that they can have in their matches. You want it to be, you don't want it to be a case of when you play comp, you've got just your average Joe with a whole system set up in the background, timing everything and anything.
It's also, remember, as much as well, for you, the professional player at home, you can do it now. You ain't going to be doing it when you're at a PGL event. You ain't going to be doing it when you're at a Blast event. I'll say that. Like, this is the thing. Like, it's not worth relying on that stuff now. Like, obviously, most people already, if you're playing that caliber of Deadlock, internal timings are nothing for you. But there is some people out there that are relying on this stuff, and I find that foolish.
Yeah, and to be fair to him, like, before, maybe it was a necessity. Like they just couldn't get it down. I mean, with the changing timings on the Rejuve, I could sort of understand it.
Yeah,
now they've got a case of like it now shows you when there's, and if you didn't know this, the Rejuve symbol actually changes on the map when it's under a minute to mid boss. So that's a very important thing to keep your eye on at all times, because the game just tells you now. It just tells you now. There's also really cool stuff, like even just staying on audio, because at this point, like they've done such a good job. There's new ping update systems. I still think they need to implement this in a potentially easier way to find, but I've been taking around with it and it's very cool. There's loads of new ping updates that you can add to your wheel, where it's a case of the stuff here like Rejuice dropping, come with me, never mind, press the advantage, I'm not ready to team fight, let's hide here, let's meet here, or I'll flank them. These are all really cool things to add, because I know that in a lot of our matches some people aren't comfortable talking, some people speak a completely different language to you. That's also okay. It's okay to be from a different country, guys. But these things are all ways that you can communicate with your teammates to tell you what you're doing. And I think a Deadlock is really important, because at the end of the day, it's very team-based. Like, if you can group up, push a walker down, push a guardian down as a team, and then spread back out again and start to push lanes, these are all things you need to be able to communicate on the fly. And the way they've done it with the ping wheels is very good, because just the conversations characters have in game, like it does. I hadn't even talked about this last podcast, but it all feels very alive, and even more so now.
100%, dude. I think as well, like, off the back of that, I would even say, arguably, Deadlock probably right now is the best game for cross-nationality sort of gameplay. If you're from a different country, you can understand. 'Cause like you say, like, obviously, the voice lines themselves translate. You've got the, all the pings being localized to your language if you want it that way. You can set it to English if you speak English as well. But I think that opens up so much more, because it's like we've had games where you're playing with people that are obviously completely different nations. Hell, we've had games where we were playing on Asian servers from not even Asia when we were traveling for work. And it was still fine, because we were just communicating through pings and through the voice lines in game, and people gonna get the gist. So even with this, it's even further iterating on that and making it better. So that's really cool. Also, that's the other one as well, by the way. I thought this was going to be in ages ago. I assumed they would do taunts, but they have added in taunts. Which is unreal, that you can actually now like BM a little bit in the pre-game lobby.
Which is awesome. There's some really cool taunts. So I highly recommend that whatever you got your ping button assigned to, you start pinging the hell out of that thing at the start of the game because they're fun.
Spam that. Yeah.
They're definitely fun. Let's talk a little bit of feedback, I reckon, for a little bit. Because there is a few things that I think could change. I think we already talked about Sin and Sacrifice. Let's start with that one.
Yeah.
I think the actual system, the actual mechanic of it, very fun, very cool. Made safes a lot more desirable in the early game and in the end game to press that advantage. I have seen Calicos with 5,600 HP though. That's a problem. I think that at the end of the day, it's a case where 3 buffs, so cool. Definitely want to be picking those up, but it's a bit too much, right? I think even just having it down to 2 buffs on the heavy melee would be acceptable at that point in time, because they had a massive problem with this early doors, I would say, when the game first came out of embargo, where the game was so snowbally. We were seeing games end at like 16, 17 minutes. I think I even saw a game end at 7 minutes before.
Yep.
And I think that these safes do create that. I will say this, that I've seen a lot of players talking about how their games are lasting much longer. I guarantee you, if you're playing, if we play this a little bit longer and people start to figure out the map, they start to understand where they need to push, how they need to push, games are going to start ending really quickly, because snowballing is definitely a menace right now. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but because the jungle camps, there feels like there's too many souls going around.
Yeah, well, there just is. I think fundamentally, it's not innately a bad thing on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
But it's because you've done so much all in one go, the trickle-down effect is there is an abundance of souls for people that understand how to make the most of them right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I completely agree. I think at most, with the Sin and Sacrifice, like 3 golden statue buffs seems egregious even when reading it. It feels far more ridiculous when you're in game.
Getting 100 HP off one save is insane.
That's what it's the fact, right, that like literally you could do the upstairs room, right, on both sides, near the theatre on the other side. You grab those, that's 4 right there. Then you've got another additional 2 on the down layer. Technically, at most, you could find yourself with an average of maybe 5 out of the 7. Like, you know what I mean? If you're kind of like struggling a bit here, if you can quickly get between them. Because people right now aren't associating that 8-minute mark with I got to go get these bad boys. So if you get your pathing right, maybe even at most you get 5 of them, right? The abundance of golden statue buffs you get out of that. And the way it feels right now as well, this is anecdotal, but I've noticed it where like, it feels like it's just stacking one stat with what it's giving you. Like when I was playing Wraith, I was just getting
like that,
free fire rate buffs, and it suddenly just feels like, well, all right, I'm just stupidly strong. Like 5 minutes into the game.
I mean, put it this way: like, say you do the safe next to your lane on the outer sides, and then you go to the upstairs rooms where you can get the 2 safes. In the mad scenario, you get all weapon damage buffs.
Yeah.
From that, so let's call it early games, so you're getting 4% extra weapon damage in the early game. If you hit 3 times on all of those saves, this is just 3 saves, you're getting 36% weapon damage. That's 11% more than what you would get from Hollow Point Ward if you were above that HP threshold, which is nuts. It's nuts.
That's also, you could do that if you average it out at maybe, let's even say worst case with the routing, 15 seconds, right, per each one of them. I'd still under a minute. You would have that before the 9-minute mark in the game. Like, which is...
it's wild.
It's ridiculous. Because also the other thing is, even if you're playing it safe and only taking the Sin and Sacrifices that are on your side of the map and communicate with your team that I'm taking these... You can do that, especially if you're in the mid lane. If you're in blue lane right now, leave one guy in blue lane. Say it's a 7. He's fine. He'll just hold that lane. He will also equally get a similar amount of souls to you from your gain from the free Sin and Sacrifices.
Yeah.
So, like, the numbers right now do just feel crazy. It feels like it's the age of farming, but it's also you need to communicate with your team and you need to maximize it, because, like, you can't have everyone leaving lanes, which I suppose goes back to kind of like you hypothesizing about the idea of having a bit more dedicated sort of jungling roles and stuff like that.
Maybe. I think that it's curious because what you're talking about kind of reminds me of like when we had the farming triangle back in 4 lanes. Like you would play yellow lane, and you would just go from the camp at the back to the camp on the right, and then the bottom right, and then you would circle back, farm the lane, and then go back to doing that triangle again. And that's how you farm up. I think it is the left side of the map right now that has the 3 safes and a huge amount of camps. So people are just like placing their Talons, their Sevens, their Infernuses on that side of the map, and then just letting them go wild in that area. They come out with 39k souls, you're about 19k, you don't know what's happened, and then they'll just dominate the match. I think that the most likely solution to this is, because I like the amount of jungle camps. I actually do.
I think it's fun.
I really think it's fun. But I think that the spawn times maybe need to be increased on them a little bit, because in the games we've played, team fighting, so fun right now. The speed at which the game takes place, the speed at which the fights are, the skill ceiling is really cool. But you're getting into these moments of lulls where for 10 minutes you are in the jungle or in the lane, and that's it.
Well, here's the thing. I went to double check because I remember they reduced it, but I didn't remember the exact amount, right? So obviously, as you've anecdotally now understood, even if you haven't experienced it for yourself, right? What me and Blanca are explaining is basically there is way more souls to go around because it just feels like there is a lot more jungle camps in a closer density. But this is the key point. This is the one that really does sort of hammer it home, right? Respawn time on small neutral camps, that's down by a minute. That's 3 minutes on the respawn for that. Mid-neutral camps are down to 5 minutes from 6 minutes. So I think that, more than anything, is kind of the issue. Because we had it right, and obviously the games we were playing, we were just like, dude, it's never dead. Like, even if you clear the whole jungle, by the time you do it all, like, say even you win a big team fight, right? And you just go, well, we don't really feel comfortable to end right now. Let's just farm everything. Before you know it, it's all back up. Like, it's all starting to come back up. It feels like you perpetually can just keep farming. Because 3 minutes is nothing. 5 minutes is nothing.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a problem. It's a hard one to breach because it's not necessarily a problem with the game. It's a problem with how the game influences you as a player. Yeah. Because I think in the higher elo, and I hate how they're bringing up higher elo, guys. I'm so sorry, but you'll watch those games, and a lot of times they won't touch the jungle half as much as someone in Archon or Phantom, or below even, because they understand that they can press the advantage and they can just finish off lanes, they can push down these walkers as 5 and keep going. They don't have to touch the jungle. They have enough of an advantage. However, the way it influences players under that elo who maybe aren't as confident, or you don't have that same coordination as a player towards the top level of the game, is that what is the most likely solution to all your problems in that moment if you feel like you're behind? It's always going to be souls. So teams just both spend an exorbitant amount of time, 15 minutes, just farming lanes, farming jungle. And I think it extends the game past the point of where it needs to be, and also detracts you from the most exciting part of the game, which is just hero interactions and team fights and 2v2s, which I think is arguably way better on this map and way better on this update. Like, it's really fun to fight now, but no one does.
Well, I think that's the awkward bit as well, though, is it's more what this has done artificially has made it so that people just don't know how to finish games even more, which obviously was a worse part of, like, you know, the older Deadlock, right?
I've got no jungle, I should probably push.
People just couldn't finish games then, but now it's on steroids where, like, they just don't, the synapses don't connect with the idea of, like, we need to shut this down, we need to do something. So, like you say, you just get into these elongated games where in reality you come back, because this map, if anything, like the idea of, like, people would go, oh, they should add a catch-up mechanic. Well, they kind of inadvertently have. They've given you the ability to get mad stacks off the golden statue buffs, which, like, even when we've had games you start to fall behind, you realize that people don't understand how much you get from that. Hell, I haven't even brought that into the equation, but mid-boxes, 10-minute mark, you go downstairs, mate, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's 9 or 10. It's a ridiculous number like that. Might even be 8, but there is so many golden statues there that even if that only gives you half of them, like, that's still a load that you can break in like a minute at most. You know what I mean? Well, maybe like 20 seconds. You jump down, break them all.
You just roll through them all.
And you get the souls as well. So it's like, this whole map feels like it's removed the idea of ever really being out of a game. You can always get back in, which in that sense is really good. But then it's more refining it, because also, I think to a degree, some level of things need to change on how they interact. Like certain abilities, certain items are also causing this issue, where it's like, man, alchemical fire, cold front, even Kelvin's nades, like if you line them up, the way that you're just kind of bursting down 3 jungle camps at once from standing in the right place or throwing it in the right place, that feels a bit weird.
Yeah, you're crushing it. And I think that there are games where people invade your jungle as well, and they just take all your jungle. And they're getting twice as many swords. Very hard to stop that as well. There's certainly ways you can scour it out, but there is many times where I found myself in a 3v1 deep in my side of the map. It's wild. It's very, very wild. And sometimes quite hard to coordinate that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's difficult. And I think that getting back into the game is great. The funny thing is, we haven't even talked about the urn. Like, that was the combat mechanic. I think I've seen the urn been placed in twice. All the games that I've played.
You know what's weird? Is it felt like all we've ever sort of wanted when talking about stuff like this on some of these podcasts as well was like, oh, they should do more side objectives, more stuff like the urn. We should have, Rat Fella to go and kill. Like, give us stuff like that. And ironically, that has gone, isn't it? Like, you are right.
Yeah.
And also, the only times I've ever seen people try and run the urn, it screwed us over more. Where it's like, actually, I wish we never even touched it. Because it just feels like it's so rough now. Especially, again, anecdotally, right? This happened way back. People never used to pick up buffs because they didn't know how to get there quick enough. People never used to pick up the urn because they didn't know how to get it around quick enough. And I think you've had that fresh reset where this is happening again. You can see, like, there's people that have put the hours in offline where we ran around for a few hours first, got an idea for everything. You know what I mean? Like, we were kind of like offline and then went, all right, now let's play, because that logically made more sense. And that's why we were able to maximize, like, getting the buffs now. Bridge buffs, mate, the amount of times I feel like I'm getting both bridge buffs for free with no contest, because you literally just wall bounce up, zip over, back, over.
I think people don't even know about the rope zip line underneath that you can just climb straight up.
I've seen the only way is to going up on roofs, going over the roofs, and it's like, bro, you can literally either use the zip line if you're right there, or it's the mid laners. If you're in blue lane, that's got to be your job. Think about the timing on that. Like, just get yourself set up so you can bounce pad over. You can hit the melee mid-air, pick it up straight back to lane. Like, just choose which one's more important. Get your teammates to call it out. If it's gun buff, movement buff, depending on who you are.
Because they're visible now, up on high. Whereas before, you couldn't really see. You basically have to min-max your eyeballs and be like, that looks like an orange glow. That's probably gun buff.
Blue.
And I think these things are definitely interesting. So I think for Urn, Urn not being run is a byproduct of the jungle never being done, because there's never a moment where you're like, we've cleared our jungle, we've pushed our lanes, let's go do the urn now, because that seems like a feasible thing to do. Because why do the urn when you could just stay in your jungle and not have to force a team fight?
I do wonder if at this point, even fundamentally, because of how the map has changed. You remember how obviously back in the day it was like you take the urn to the temple in the middle of the temple, and then they made it 2 urns. Then they added these different locations, right? Where it's like you go to all these different spots. I wonder if now maybe just the way urn works is what's making people not love it as much as well. Because obviously it silences you, you've got to run. It might cause a team fight, but usually the one guy that's carrying it is going to panic. He's not going to throw it down in time. Like, you know what I mean? If this is a random player, good luck. I'm even thinking maybe we just make it like a control point and just do something like that.
Maybe something like that, because, again, that effectively, that's what Urn is now.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times that I've made a call or heard a call recently where it's a case of, let's take the Urn so that we may get some more souls. That doesn't happen. No. The call is, let's take Urn so we can force a fight.
Yeah.
That's the main reason for it. If it's a control point, fuck yeah.
People are going to go anyway, because then it's just, imagine also that way, you're not going from one location to the other. It's just this dedicated location that's spawned in, 1 of 3, 1 of 4, hell, whatever. You know, you're going to go there. Guys, they've got 2 on the point. We need to outnumber them with 3 of them or win the fight. Yeah. Same thing happens. You all get incremental souls for it. maybe that's just the way to do it. Because I think people are, I don't know, obviously pro play, it's gonna be what it is. People are gonna know how to do this stuff and maximize it when the time's right. But pug play, it does feel like it's either the Ivy picks it up and flaps it across the map, or most people don't touch it. And it's just getting to the point where I feel like that percentage is getting less and less.
That is right. It's literally the players right now. If you've got an Ivy on your team, you're going to get urns in.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, it shouldn't be a case of one hero is the reason for doing urn. So, yeah, that's something that needs to change. Again, I think if it's a case of you have proper side objectives, you reduce the amount of jungle, and you get more fights going. Like, that, at the end of the day, that's what you want to have. You don't want the game to turn into farming simulator, which is what it has been for quite a few teams. You want squads that I particularly like the idea that if you are a better player, then you win the game. And we have some friends who don't farm as often, but we know that they're good at games, but they just don't have the soul count a lot of times. I'd rather it wasn't a case of that guy is sick at farming, therefore he wins the game.
Yeah.
I'd rather it was a case of that guy is unreal on the Wraith. I cannot pin him down. He hits the most insane telekinesis. His aim is impeccable, and the way he throws the cards is crazy. Like, I just cannot deal with it. That's what I'd rather lose to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the thing that I think is so hard to kind of pin down with Deadlock right now, because we've had conversations about this where I was like, oh, dude, I kind of hate the. Actually, it feels like importance of aim skill and gun heroes has decreased with time.
Yeah,
but we lived through when gun heroes basically just dominated everything. Everyone was building gun, and it was, like, honestly, it was shit. It was shit. Like, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
It was a weird time in the game. It kind of threw everything off, but I still do miss, to a degree, that element of skill expression in different ways as well.
Yeah.
Like, it is kind of, I get it, it's a MOBA, right? But Deadlock isn't. In its own right, it also isn't. Like, especially now, it's giving people more sort of, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's giving people more room to say, oh, it is just a MOBA, especially going back to 3 lanes. But that doesn't fundamentally change what the game is. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And I think you've got a lot of opportunity for, like, if you're really good at skill shots, if you're good at aiming, if you're good at movement, all of this stuff, but you don't get the most out of that all the time. Because I feel like now especially it is, you need to farm, bro. Like, I need you to go and kill those camps. I need you to make sure you're getting all your souls from lane. I need you to deny. I need you to play safe. Yeah. And that's kind of more the thing that I don't know if even Valve thought with the idea of changing the souls so you don't have to secure them anymore in terms of last hit. They just generate a soul. If they were hoping that would also intend that you could fight 1v1s, 2v2s in lane more, because you don't always have to be getting bullets off on the creep, right? You can also just fight each other. But I feel like, if anything, it's kind of made it where it's like, in reality, deaths don't mean that much in the first, 15 to 20 minutes, realistically. Like, it's not that bad. It's not the end of the world. So,
I went 2 and 6 and still win a game. So
yeah, that's what I mean. It just feels like playing safe is the smarter option. Like, safe lock, play in your lane, maximize the camps, get the golden Buddhas, win one big fight, get rejuve, break the shrines, wait 10 minutes, win the game.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a lot of cases where we get to that point where we farm for 20 minutes and we're like, we farm for 20 minutes and now it's going to be a case of one team fight is going to be the decider.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the fighting a lot more than I enjoy the farming at the end of the day. And I think that's what the change was intended to do, right? Is that I enjoy the micromanagement to a degree of dealing with creeps in the lane. That's fine. But again, I would much rather be shooting the dudes in front of me who are on the enemy team and trying to outplay them. And I think that we have a lot of feedback here. And I just want to make a clear distinction that I do really like where the game has gone.
Oh, yeah.
Just sort that out really quick.
Parry
the
haters.
Parry the focus. There we go. But yeah, so let me just sort this out really quickly, because it is a case I do really enjoy where the game's going. I think they've made a load of really good changes. And like I was saying earlier, this is a case of now just starting to bring things back a little bit to retune the game. But another thing that I think definitely needs a little bit of work is probably the deny system. Because I enjoy the fact that they auto-secure. I enjoy the fact that they are quicker to secure as well when they pop out. I do not enjoy the fact that they pop straight up and it ruins burst fire characters.
Yep.
And Kelvin is the most disgusting character to play against in a lane. Him and Bebop, arguably, because they both have. I think they're the only two characters with what when we call hit scan. I think for Kelvin it's more pseudo hit scan with the ice beam. We were playing yesterday, in fact, where I played a Kelvin lane, and all I did was just ice beam above the creep as he was about to die. I instant secure. I deny 3 to 4 troopers every wave. By the end of it, I think me and my lane partner were 9k to their 3.4. Like, that seems unacceptable. And it took me little to no skill to achieve. That's the big thing. Little to no skill to achieve. I literally just pointed above the trooper. So I think that pretty easy way to deal with that, because I still really like all the other systems, is just to randomize the soul path when it comes out. That's it. That's all you have to do. Just give the other team a chance. If they've got burst fire, like imagine you're playing Magician and Paradox in lane. You're ruined. You're ruined at that point.
Yeah. Well, it's bad. It's noticeable. It's even like in characters with slightly higher rate of fire as well. Like if you're doing it with like a 7, if you get caught in that point where now, obviously, because you're not really intentionally supposed to be shooting the creep as much, if they die at a similar time, you're mid reload on the burst, you might just not get any of the souls easily. They could just deny them. Same thing with Lash as well. I feel like on Lash, denying has become a real pain, because it's not, before at least it was a bit of a skill check where like you're having to aim in the right place. Like, oh, do I flick to the right? Do I flick to the left? Removing the buffer, good. Don't need the buffer. That shouldn't be a thing. Make denies competitive. 50-50 split. That's genius. Like, I love that again. It feels like we took some of the good elements of the old Soul system, because obviously we've been around long enough in this game that we remember that it did used to just go straight up. And when they added the wibbly wobbly ones, we went, oh, that feels a bit weird. Yeah. But now it's like, kind of miss it, actually, was probably the better change. They solved it. They've just gone back, which means they can go back again and put it back. Which
it is so hard for Valve. I really do feel from that aspect, because we are prime examples of this, where like a change happens and we go, oh, I don't really like that. And then later, like you say, we're like, oh, maybe I do miss that.
Maybe that was better. And we just, Because that's the thing. I remember even on the day, you were like, oh, I don't like this. And I went, no, I think with time, the wobbly lines will be better, because you have to aim a bit more. And then obviously, like 6 months from now, it's fine. We've just accepted that it's good. As soon as they give you the old way back, you realize, actually, fuck. Like, it is kind of annoying.
It's kind of bad, yeah. Which I think actually is a very good indicator of whether it isn't the greatest of changes, because if at some point I missed it and then we go back to it and I'm like, actually, this really was not the play. Better, that's a good indicator. So, I do think there's a case of just getting completely stalled out of a lane feels horrid. And again, there are ways to get back in, but you don't want to relegate 2 players on the enemy team to jungle duty for the next 20 minutes or so, just so they can play with the team again. So there's definitely things to be changed from this patch, and I'm imagining they're getting a lot of feedback coming through on the forums about it. They're going through all of it right now, but I think it's mostly easy stuff to change, honestly.
The fundamentals, and I think that's the key point, because obviously we've tried to explain this. Like I said it in patch notes, I think Dam said it on DLN, you said it here, where all of us have said we do enjoy this. Like, this overall, arguably, is a really good update. It's got a lot in it, but it's, again, because there's so much, there's a lot to talk about to actually give feedback on, rather than talking about pineapples. But I think it's more, like you say, the big changes I have no issue with at all. I think the way that you've moved stuff to accommodate the new map, especially, like, honestly, the underground connections, like, think about the theater, the bodega, they were kind of shit before. Like, you would just get trapped there. If you caught someone going in, gank them, you're dead, good luck. Now you can juke out into the underground. The underground feels a bit more lively again. Hell, I'm back down there breaking boxes, which I felt like I didn't do for a while because it just didn't lead anywhere. Feels a bit more enjoyable there. The verticality, right? That's the other thing. We mentioned the fact that obviously, like, souls have gone up because of the soul changes, the way that stuff's working with the new jump camps, but also they've literally basically taken, like, the Microsoft paintbrush and just gone breakables. All over the roofs, everywhere. And it feels better. Like, I'm standing up on rooftops tapping all the boxes because, again, the sound design have owned it. When you break a box now that had something in it, it plays that little, like, dwee, you know?
No, which is nice.
There's visual and audio feedback for basically everything you do in the game. I think they've kind of gone above and beyond with all the little things they've done in this patch, and there's so much here that now feels like it's been there forever, and I'd hate it if it went away, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's why these things that we are noticing and going, oh, this could be better, this could be better, you can fix that. You give that like 2 months minimum, maximum even, you know what I mean? Like, you can sort all that stuff out and have the game in a really good spot alongside pushing updates like this, where the map gets prettier and prettier.
Yeah, again, it's pretty simple stuff. It's actually really simple stuff because they've tested things, and I think that we're going down the right road, but there's potholes. But those are pretty easy to fill in.
Yeah.
As long as your council's on top of things, which our council is Valve, and we know that they are. So I think that there's definitely a way to go about it. Most stuff we said here are practically just a case of just typing a couple of... I was about to just really underestimate how easy coding was.
Just type in the numbers on the source 2 and press the button, Valve. Yoshi sat there like...
What do you mean? Do you
know how long that takes?
Yeah. It's not a case of typing a couple of numbers, but it's stuff that has, in my opinion...
Yeah. It's easier than the other changes.
I'll put it that
way.
Like, it's seeable, yeah.
It should be values, not overhauls. That's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think if we look back, even if you guys look back on some videos from maybe 3-4 months ago of Deadlock, you will see just how different the game is in terms of speed, how fast the game is, how fun the fighting is. That's as we're coming to probably the end of this segment, I think that's probably the thing that I would reiterate the most, is that the fighting is unreal fun right now in the game. That's the best part.
Mate, it's the fact that all goes back to also the map changes encouraging more fights to a degree. Like, there is more reason that you want to scrap now, because having 3 big things to smash to bits means that you've got to get there quicker, rather than 4 big things to smash to bits where your attention's a little bit more split. Also, just innately, like, they upped the tick rate a little bit. You've gone up from 60 hertz to 64 hertz. Like, that's fine. That's good. That's a good change, you know. If someone from CS, like, having 64 minimum, that should be baseline. That's great. That's a good change to have. And you do notice it. The game does feel more responsive. Like, it's a weird one to pin down, but you notice it. The minute you start playing, you're like, oh, the game does feel nicer, like something feels better, and that is just the tick rate being a little bit higher, and obviously just everything they've done with the netcode. Like, that's the other element of it. You can see that they've actually sat down and basically gone, okay, we need to refine a lot of what we've done here. It's not so much slapping it together and making the game now. It feels like now we're in the stage of like, right, gameplay team, refine that. The art team, refine that. Sound team, refine that. And that to me is a great sign, because that makes me think we're getting closer and closer to them being like, cool, we're happy to say this is the initial version of Deadlock, you know, Deadlock 1.0 for everyone.
Which is fair, because even in most MOBAs, there is still overhauls that happen after release. I think that, like I said, the most promising thing is that art passes are getting done, which is feeling like we're getting closer and closer to that point of it's out there now. I think you used the term bells and whistles earlier, and I think those are going to get added pretty soon. But I think that they're getting happier and happier with it. We're at that point in time where, again, I think Earn needs to be looked at. We've held on to it for a long time. Maybe it needs a rework. Who knows? We need potentially new side objectives. Again, just encourage more fighting on the map. That's it. And that would be fun, because at the moment the big thing is like we bait Earn or we bait mid boss, and I don't like either of those at the moment. I think that they're fun, but they feel a little stale in that sense of that's realistically all you're using them for at the moment.
It also feels a bit archaic, because as much as it's a gameplay mechanic, like, it's just something we've come up with, because it's like, oh, they will come because the audio, they will come because the map. Whereas it's like, give me an actual... I want them to come to me, like, give me a reason for this to be a scrap. Like, hell, dude, there's so many things you could do. Whereas, like, literally, have a little banner that pops up, first 2 heroes that get there have a 1v1. Whoever wins, you know what I mean? Like just random
Lock them
stuff.
in a cage, something like that. Yeah.
Go through a random cycle of different events that can happen. Like
that would be cool, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be using a mechanic that's completely for something else to. Especially, I think. Okay, this is the big one for me, is that mid boss is such a dangerous thing to bait as well, right? But a lot of times that's the only thing you can realistically try and bait for. So again, having far reduced respawn time, getting fire rate, getting extra regen, it's huge. Getting the big troopers coming in, the large boys on the map, that's awesome. But that's not something you want to bait a lot of times. That's something like that. You're playing with fire at that point. You got to, and that's the thing. You've got to know you're going to win that fight, which means more farming, more farm simulator. I'd much rather have these side objectives, which maybe aren't as crazy of a buff, as crazy as an advantage. Maybe just something that like it spawns an extra wave for your team. That would be cool. And even if the enemy team is like, well, we lost the side objective, we fought them for it. Not a huge deal. Or it's a case of, well, we can give that up. But it gives another way for the team to pressure the objectives, and then they continue to push their game forward. So again, I think that's what we've been advocating for this for a long time.
Yeah.
This is not a case of Yoshi just typing in some numbers. There's going to be a little bit extra work.
The whole team has to come together, figure it out, decide what they like, probably test it, then roll it out, then test it, then add a model, then sounds and everything. Like, that's a whole new part of Deadlock we're asking for. But I think it is something that, there's a reason we keep coming back to it and always think this would be useful, this would be good.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't want to be the creepy dudes in your game that's sitting on your tier 3. Like, I want to be 3 guys just sat in your jungle waiting for you to come along. It feels so wrong. I don't want to be that guy. I'd rather fight for something meaningful.
It's really frustrating as well, because that's the thing where I think it's hard right now, especially in pub games, where, like, obviously, logically, it's a risk that 3 of you group up in the first 8 minutes and go into their jungle and kill one guy who's punching us in a sacrifice. But you're going to get away with it and then probably get away because there's so many bounce pads. So having that communication of telling your teammates, like, guys, you need to push yellow and blue right now. Like, please, what are you doing? Yeah. And they're just not going to believe you, because they're going to go, oh, yeah, all right. Oh, yeah. Like, what, there's 3 guys there. You've got yourself caught there. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, it's one of those where I think there is issues there, which would be, you want more fights, but you want more meaningful fights. And you also want more reasons to, like, I want to farm. But I want to farm in ways where, if you're going to put a big focus on the PvE element of it, make it enjoyable at least. Because that's why I like the changes with the Sin of Sacrifice in terms of it's timing based now. It's a little bit more. Fun. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you are going to be like, oh, I missed that one by a second. And it's the pressure, because it's timing based, but there's no artificial time limit. Like, it just keeps going round and round. The only pressure that's on you is someone going to come and gank me? Is someone going to come and steal it?
Do I just need to whack this right now and get out?
Yeah. Do I have to hit it and peace out, run the risk of not getting the buff, but then they don't get the buff? There's layers to it where, like, that's kind of cool. That's a fun change. And I think stuff like that is the way to go,
Exactly. Like, because, for instance, like, I think what you're talking about there is important to have a conversation about, because if there's 3 guys in your jungle, killing a guardian for players, it doesn't do a whole lot for them other than get them some souls. It's not exciting for them to do. They know they need to do it to win the game. But imagine there's 3 guys in your jungle at your tier 3. Their side objective is just, the side objective on that side of the map's just spawned. They're like, damn, we're going to get something cool out of this, which will directly benefit my character. There's 3 guys over there. Let's just group on that. That's an exciting thing to go for. And that would discourage players from being like, yeah, we're going to hang out in their jungle for like 15 minutes, just wait for someone to come along. It's like, now you're giving up objectives on the map, which feel beneficial. But again, it's all difficult. It's all difficult to balance.
Exactly. It's hard. And I think that's also, that hits the nail on the head as well, by the way, of like the issue of what you said there, where you were like, for most people, breaking that Guardian's not going to really reward me. And it's like, yeah, but we do need to somehow change that mindset in people. Yeah. Because That is the whole game. Like, that is what I need you to do. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to break that thing to bits, clear the wave, break the walker as soon as you can, like, within reason of, like, don't just die over and over again.
Yeah.
You need to take these things. And I think people get lost now, especially, where there's so much else to do that is always there, that they just do that because they're like, oh, well, if I'm trying to get souls, I'm going to do this. But in reality, it's like, yeah, but the reason you get those souls is to take these objectives quicker. Like, fighting, sure, but, you know.
I do you remember when we used to get skill points from taking Guardians?
AP, yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder if like maybe we bring something like that back. AP is so incredibly busted getting those from Guardians, but potentially you up the amount of soul counts required to gain AP in the first place. But that type of stuff, again, anyone who was involved in taking down that Guardian gets that AP point.
There is less AP bloat, though, if you think about the fact you've removed one Guardian, one Walker.
Yeah, true. So it's not a case of like, oh, I want to push that Guardian because I want to get stronger.
I want to get an ability point right now,
Yeah. But it's hard because, again, it's a team game. You shouldn't have to incentivize these things. But there are a lot of games out there where once you take a Guardian or an equivalent, you do get an advantage for it. But
I think it's also the issue is, though, unlike most other MOBAs, Deadlock is a game where your team is competing against themselves as much as they are competing against the enemy.
Yeah.
And it's like some people are playing PvP, some people are playing PvE, and some people are playing both. That's the like weird distinction in this game, is you do have some people that will just farm the entire game. They'll just peace out. You'll never see them.
Yeah.
Then they rock up to the party at the end. They still won't even really fight. They'll just shoot the objectives and that's it. And it's just like, you know, there's so much weirdness going on where I just think
it's so hard.
People need time to learn the game. They just do.
They really
it's weird. It's been
really
like, what, 9 months now since we first got access. Obviously, to us, it's like, come on, man. I feel like an old man sat there just going, you kids, you've got to be breaking those objectives. You've got to be helping each other out. What are you doing? But for other people, it's like, dude, there's so many people that are just, they play like 10 games and that's it. You know what I mean? It just doesn't all make sense yet because there's so much to it.
Which is fair. It's a complex game at the end of the day. And it's really hard. I don't envy Valve's position at all right now because what they have is a game that has such unbelievable potential.
Yeah.
And you're fighting against the whims and wishes of players because it's so easy to play the game multiple ways. Because that guy that goes in the jungle for 30 minutes of the game can either be the reason you win the game or that you lose the game. And it's difficult because I have actually seen this discussion. I can't remember where it was, but someone made a really good point of just like that guy that does just PvE all game. He will most likely win 50% of his games, not because of his playstyle, but based on the fact of whether his 5 other teammates can hold down the fort whilst he does that.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is literally the reason
because you
winning.
have to have a good team.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing that, you're inting someone, which by in turn ints everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you've got to have 5 other players that can hold down the fort whilst you do that, and then you come out. The game's not completely lost, then you can carry. If the game just gets crushed by the time you come out of the jungle, it doesn't matter at that point because team's already like at your level of souls and you're no longer ahead. You're just even. You're not enough to carry. Yeah. So it's hard to make that distinction because it's a false positive in a lot of players' minds of, well, I won that game because I farmed, but I've lost this game, so it must be because my team's rubbish. And in a way, they are right, but you're part of the problem.
Man, it's so weird, like being able to sort of understand how to fix any of this stuff, though, because it's also like you say, it's very risky. I imagine from a Valve standpoint to kind of change any of this stuff fundamentally or overhaul any of these things. It's why they don't do stuff by halves. You know, they're not the sort of company that just jumps in and goes, all right. New map, new this, 3 lanes. Like they think about this stuff. They check the numbers. They run the maths time and time again. They're a company that has no one to answer for. It's not like they've got shareholders breathing down their necks telling them, you've got to do this. Where's the players? All they want to do at the end of the day is make a game that they are happy with and that they know people will be happy with and enjoy for years to come, because that's what they've always done, right? Like they focus on the game being the most important point first, then everything else comes with it. And I think they really are. I think that's why Deadlock is so interesting, because even if you try and feign ignorance and turn the other way, right? The industry has already taken note of it. You can see that there's other companies, other studios, other people.
The 4-lane carbon copies. It's like, that's not a thing anymore.
That started taking ideas from this. And it's hilarious to me, because it almost feels like it was a sick joke from Valve, where they've let everyone start to copy it. Overwatch, all these other companies that have decided to rip off the shop, the way it works, the item synergies, the ideas behind it, the 4 lanes, start working on their own versions. And now it's a 3-lane game, and we've changed loads of stuff about it. And we're going to keep changing loads of stuff about it, which I find absolutely hilarious. Because at the end of the day, imitations only get you so far, you know? Like, there's a reason why the real sort of games tend to shine. And obviously that's always been Valve's mantra, where I think they put the player experience and the gameplay first. Monetization is usually just something that comes along with it. And if you want to dabble in it, you can. It's never forced upon you. Like Dota, you get your different, outfit pieces. Some people love it. Some people love supporting the esports scene. It's there if you want it. You don't need it. Counter-Strike. Gun works the same if you have an Asimov or if you have a base level gun. You know what I mean? Like, none of it matters. Yeah. But then obviously you look at other games, and I think what they do first is they make a game to sell things, then the game. And that's where I think Valve will never have this issue with Deadlock. It's not as if they're going to make this game and they're going to go, fuck, the profits are low. They're always going to try and make sure it's just good.
You're going to make it until it's fun, right?
Exactly.
I mean, what were you telling me the other day about it changing? I think it's been Project 8 for a while now, hasn't it? Still Project 8?
I'm not sure. Let me double check. Because, there was a big update, wasn't there? And I think let me have a look.
Yeah.
Because it was called Citadel in the game files. Where's the EXE? Let's have a look.
Pull up the EXE.
Let me boot him up. And
boot him up,
Terry.
Boot him up.
Load up the Deadlock. But because I think that's one of those where it's like, obviously, I don't even know what Project 8 really stands for, by the way, because it wasn't the 8th project at Valve.
No.
But
Project Infinity? They're going to work on it forever?
Hang on. No, it's on the taskbar. It says Deadlock, but it says project8.exe. But I thought they had changed it.
Yeah, maybe it's just Citadel to Project 8 again. But so I think that overall, the way that the game's going, like they're pouring resources into this thing. It's still getting updated regularly, which is nice. And putting all the negatives aside, because those are all fixable things. And it's always good to have a discussion about those things in the first place. The game feels awesome. The lighting's all changed. There's been loads of optimization updates. The game just plays a lot better now.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's definitely fun. I think, again, it does feel like another situation where the game can only go up from here. But there's definitely things that can be changed and can make the game better. But right at the beginning, and we'll keep saying this is a good direction for Deadlock, I'd say.
No, 100%. I think it's in a really good spot. It's enjoyable. It's fun. Man, I don't know. I think it's just one of those where like you've shipped such a big fun update that this as well should calm the people down, where you got so lost in the rhetoric of people, I think, just going, where's the updates? Where's the updates? Like, guys, they literally told you they're going to slow down the updates because they're working on stuff. Hopefully this makes people realize, like, okay, they're doing stuff. They're just not always going to show it to us, which is fine. At this point, everything's fine. Like, again, I think we get it and feel very lucky that we are even able to play this game in the states it's been in for so long, where in reality, they could have just never given it to any of us. It never needed to go public. It never needed to go anywhere. It could have just been a little test with a couple people for ages. And then who knows, maybe at that point they don't get the feedback they want and they scrap it. Because, that happens a lot with Valve. But I think the fact that it is as out in the open as it is goes to show that, like, this isn't going anywhere. It's not like a test that they're going to get rid of. They're happy with it, and they've committed to it. And this team clearly loves it.
Exactly. So, again, thank you, Valve, for bringing out such a huge update. We've really enjoyed it so far. There's always going to be things to be changed, especially with a massive update like this. But it's all the right stuff this game changed about. The game feels pretty damn good. When we're fighting, it's awesome. Some of the best team fights I've had in any game I've ever played. But I'm excited to... Actually, I'm very excited to play Deadlock right now, actually. I might play it once I finish this podcast. But, yeah, things are only going to get better. Right now, I'm curious to see what the next patch is going to be like. Very, very excited. I know it's not going to be for a while yet, but this one was already so awesome. So excited. Thank you for once again listening to a full podcast, a full long podcast. It was rambling about things. Yeah, this is very Deadlock orientated.
See, this goes to show when people sit there and they're like, why are they not talking about Deadlock? Because there isn't always stuff to talk about every week, all right? But when there is, that's what we're here for. So I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, get out there, get playing, give your feedback as well. Again, for most of you, I know probably it's hard to get the conversion rate up these days of the people that are coming in, playing a little bit, and then going on the forums. But if you have actual feedback about the game, post it on the forums. Yeah. Don't rant about it on Reddit. Don't moan about it to your friends on Discord.
They're listening.
Write it up. Put it on the forums. That's literally the whole point of the game. That's why it exists. That's why they give you forum access. So use that. That's a privilege. That is a cool thing that we have here. We can affect the development of the game. So make the most of that. I imagine if you've watched this far, you're probably more reasonable as a human being anyway and going to do that. But, oh well. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode, everyone. Massive update. Get out there, get playing. We'll probably see you at mid-boss, and I'm going to be stealing your rejuve. So that's mine now. Unfortunate. All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See ya.